The screaming from beneath the bridge stopped at exactly 3:17 a.m., just like it did every night. Marcus Chen pressed his ear against the cold metal of the operator booth window, counting the seconds until the silence would break. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. Then came the sound that made his blood freeze, the grinding of rusted gears that shouldn't exist anywhere near the Duluth Lift Bridge's pristine machinery. Welcome back to the channel, Night Owls. I'm here with another true horror story that'll make you question everything you think you know about the world around us. Before we dive into this nightmare, let me ask, where are you watching from tonight? Are you alone? Maybe you should turn on some lights for this one. Don't forget to hit that like button if this story gives you chills, and subscribe for more terrifying tales from the shadows of America. Marcus had been working the midnight shift at Duluth's iconic lift bridge for 3 months when he received the list. 5 simple rules typed on yellowed papers slipped under his booth door by his predecessor, an old-timer named Vernon, who'd quit without explanation. The rules seemed innocent enough at first glance, typical workplace safety protocols with odd specifics. But Vernon's handwritten note at the bottom made Marcus's stomach turn. Follow these exactly, or you'll end up like the others. The bridge remembers everything. The Duluth Lift Bridge stands majestically over the Duluth Ship Canal, connecting Minnesota to Wisconsin across the dark waters of Lake Superior. During the day, tourists snap photos and ships pass through the raised span. But at night, when the fog rolls in from the lake and the temperature drops below freezing, the bridge becomes something else entirely, something hungry, something that feeds on the desperation of those who dare to work alone in its shadow. Tonight, as Marcus clutched the crumpled rules in his trembling hand and watched the security cameras flicker between static and impossible images, he realized that some jobs come with a price far higher than minimum wage. The screaming had started again, echoing from the depths of the canal, and this time it sounded almost familiar. Marcus Chen had never intended to work nights. Fresh out of college with a degree in engineering, he'd moved to Duluth for what he thought would be a temporary position, just enough to pay off student loans and figure out his next move. The job posting for Bridge Operations Specialist, night shift, had seemed straightforward enough: monitor vessel traffic, operate the lift mechanism when ships needed passage, and maintain security protocols. The pay was surprisingly good for such simple duties, almost too good. The Duluth Lift Bridge was an engineering marvel, built in 1905 and standing 138 feet above the canal when fully raised. During Marcus's training, his supervisor had walked him through the modern computerized systems that controlled the massive counterweights and motors. Everything was automated, precise, and efficient. The night shift rarely saw ship traffic. Most vessels preferred daylight passage through the canal. His job would essentially be to sit in the climate-controlled operator booth, monitor the equipment, and respond to the occasional late-night emergency. Marcus had always been a logical person. He approached problems systematically, trusted in facts and data. His booth was equipped with multiple monitors displaying feed from security cameras, positioned along the bridge's length, sophisticated weather monitoring equipment, and direct communication lines to Coast Guard stations. The setup felt more like mission control than a simple bridge operator position, but Marcus attributed this to modern safety protocols. The booth itself was a compact, glass-walled room suspended above the roadway, offering a commanding view of the canal and Lake Superior beyond. During his first week, Marcus found the isolation peaceful. He'd brought textbooks to study for his professional engineering exam, downloaded podcasts about structural design, and even started a journal documenting the bridge's nightly patterns. The work seemed almost meditative, watching the rhythmic pulse of navigation lights on distant freighters, listening to the gentle hum of machinery, observing the way fog moved across the water like a living thing. But small inconsistencies began to nag at him. The security cameras would sometimes display timestamp glitches, jumping backwards several minutes before resuming normal time. Temperature readings from the outdoor sensors occasionally spiked to impossible levels, 158 degrees Fahrenheit, on a October night when the actual air temperature was barely 35 degrees. The emergency communication system would crackle with static at precisely 2:43 a.m. each night, lasting exactly 90 seconds before returning to normal. Marcus had reported these anomalies to his supervisor, a tired-looking man named Rodriguez, who always seemed to be in a hurry to end their conversations. "Old equipment," Rodriguez would mutter, making notes that Marcus suspected were never filed. "We're due for upgrades next fiscal year." But the equipment wasn't old. Marcus had seen the installation dates on most systems, and nothing was more than 5 years old. The strangest detail was the previous night shift worker, Vernon Kowalski. Rodriguez had mentioned Vernon's sudden departure, but provided no details about his reasons for leaving or his current whereabouts. When Marcus asked other day shift workers about Vernon, their responses were oddly vague and uncomfortable. "Kept to himself," they'd say, or "nice enough guy but seemed nervous toward the end." One maintenance worker had simply shaken his head and walked away when Marcus brought up Vernon's name. It was Marcus's 15th night on the job when he found the envelope. He'd arrived at 11:30 p.m. for the midnight shift change, following his usual routine of checking equipment readings and reviewing the day shift log. Rodriguez handed over the keys and security codes with his typical brisk efficiency, mentioned that a freighter was scheduled for a possible late-night passage around 3 a.m., and disappeared into the elevator without his usual small talk. Marcus settled into the operator chair and began his equipment checks. All systems showed green. Weather conditions were clear with light fog developing over the lake. Ship traffic was minimal, only a few distant navigation lights visible on the dark horizon. He was reaching for his engineering textbook when he noticed something white on the floor near the door. The envelope was unmarked cream-colored paper that felt expensive between his fingers. Inside was a single sheet of the same paper with 5 rules typed in an old-fashioned typewriter font. Night Shift Protocol. Duluth Lift Bridge. Rule 1: between midnight and 6 a.m., do not acknowledge any personnel claiming to be maintenance workers. Authorized maintenance occurs only during day shift hours. Rule 2: if you hear voices calling from beneath the bridge, do not investigate. Do not respond. Do not look directly down into the canal. Rule 3: camera feeds may display individuals on the bridge structure. If someone appears to be climbing the towers or walking on the span outside normal pedestrian areas, do not attempt contact. Log the incident, but take no action. Rule 4: should the lift mechanism activate without authorization, allow it to complete its cycle. Do not attempt manual override. Do not investigate the reason for activation. Rule 5: if you see Vernon Kowalski, leave immediately. Vernon Kowalski died on this bridge 6 months ago. At the bottom of the page, in shaky handwriting that looked like it had been written under stress, someone had added, "Follow these exactly, or you'll end up like the others. The bridge remembers everything. VK." Marcus read the rules 3 times, his logical mind rejecting what he was seeing. This had to be some kind of hazing ritual for new night shift workers, an elaborate practical joke designed to mess with him. Vernon Kowalski dead. That was impossible. Rodriguez had specifically mentioned Vernon quitting, not dying, and the rules themselves were absurd. Maintenance workers had identification badges and scheduled access. Security protocols existed for a reason. He considered calling Rodriguez, but decided against it. If this was a joke, he didn't want to look like someone who couldn't handle a little workplace humor. Marcus folded the paper and slipped it into his jacket pocket, returning his attention to the monitoring equipment. The first sign that something was genuinely wrong came at 12:47 a.m. Camera feed from the South Tower showed a figure in coveralls walking along the maintenance walkway. The image was clear enough to see details: middle-aged man, tool belt, reflective safety vest. But according to Marcus's shift log, no maintenance was scheduled, and the tower access doors were supposed to be locked during night hours. Marcus checked the access control system. All doors showed secure status. No key cards had been used since the day shift ended, yet there was definitely someone moving around the tower structure. Following normal protocol, Marcus tried to radio the figure. "Bridge security to maintenance personnel on South Tower, please respond." Static filled his headset. He tried again. "Unidentified worker on South Tower, please identify yourself and state your authorization." Nothing but white noise. The figure on the camera had stopped walking and appeared to be looking directly at the camera. Even through the grainy feed, Marcus could see the man's face clearly now. He was smiling, but it wasn't a friendly expression. It was the kind of smile that made Marcus's skin crawl too wide, too knowing, too deliberate. Then the figure raised his hand and waved. Marcus's rational mind scrambled for explanations. Maybe the radio was malfunctioning. Maybe this was scheduled maintenance that hadn't been properly logged. Maybe the access control system had a glitch and someone had legitimate business on the tower. But deep in his gut, a primal alarm was ringing. Everything about this situation felt wrong. He reached for his phone to call Rodriguez when the lights in his booth flickered. Not the steady hum of electrical systems, but a distinct flicker, 3 quick pulses, then darkness for 2 seconds, then normal lighting resumed. When Marcus looked back at the camera monitor, the walkway was empty. Marcus pulled up camera feeds from every angle of the south tower. Nothing. He rewound the digital recordings but found only empty walkways stretching back to the beginning of his shift. According to the system, no one had been on the tower at all. That was when Marcus remembered the rules, and for the first time he felt genuine fear. He pulled the paper from his pocket and reread Rule 3. Camera feeds may display individuals on the bridge structure. If someone appears to be climbing the towers or walking on the span outside normal pedestrian areas, do not attempt contact. Log the incident but take no action. His hands trembling slightly, Marcus opened the shift log and made an entry. 12:47 a.m. Unidentified individual observed on South Tower maintenance walkway. Visual contact only. No radio response. Subject disappeared from view. No further action taken per protocol. As he finished typing, a new sound reached his ears, metal grinding against metal coming from somewhere below the booth. It wasn't the familiar hum of the bridge's normal machinery. This was wrong, discordant, like gears that hadn't been oiled in decades, trying to turn against rust and corrosion. Marcus looked at the lift mechanism controls. All systems showed normal status. The bridge was down, locked in position for vehicle traffic. Nothing should be moving, but something was definitely moving down there in the dark. The grinding sound continued for exactly 17 minutes, then stopped as abruptly as it had begun. Marcus had timed it obsessively, watching the digital clock on his control panel tick away each second while his imagination conjured increasingly disturbing explanations for what he was hearing. The bridge's engineering reports were stored in his computer terminal. He'd reviewed them during training. Every moving part was cataloged. Every sound the structure should make was documented and expected. This grinding noise wasn't in any manual. At 1:15 a.m., the temperature readings from the outdoor sensors began their nightly malfunction. But this time, Marcus was watching closely. The numbers didn't just spike randomly. They climbed steadily from 32 degrees to 74 degrees over the course of 3 minutes, held that temperature for exactly 90 seconds, then plummeted to 14 degrees below zero before returning to normal, as if something had passed by each sensor, radiating heat, then draining it away. Marcus pulled up the maintenance records for the temperature monitoring system. According to the files, the sensors had been replaced just 2 months ago after persistent calibration errors. The previous set had been installed only 6 months before that, also replacing defective equipment. In fact, looking back through 5 years of records, the temperature sensors had been replaced 14 times. No other bridge system showed similar patterns of repeated failure. He was studying the maintenance logs when movement on camera feed caught his attention. Camera 12, positioned on the north tower, showed someone walking along the roadway of the bridge. This time it wasn't maintenance coveralls. The figure wore dark civilian clothing and moved with an odd shuffling gait. Marcus checked the access logs. The bridge had been closed to pedestrian traffic since 10 p.m. standard procedure for night hours. Vehicle traffic was minimal but not restricted. Yet this person was walking, not driving, and they'd somehow bypassed the pedestrian access barriers. Following the rules he'd memorized, Marcus made no attempt to contact the figure, but he watched transfixed as the person moved slowly across the span. The camera angles made it difficult to determine gender or age, but something about the figure's posture bothered him. They weren't walking like someone who belonged there. They moved like someone who was hurt or sick or... The figure stopped directly beneath camera 9 and looked up. Even through the grainy night vision feed, Marcus could see the person's face clearly. It was pale, unnaturally so, with dark hollows where the eyes should be. But worse than the face was the smile, the same too wide knowing expression he'd seen on the maintenance worker earlier. The figure raised one hand and pointed directly at Marcus's booth. Every light in the operator booth went out simultaneously. Emergency power should have kicked in immediately. The booth was equipped with battery backups, specifically to prevent total power loss. But Marcus sat in complete darkness, surrounded by the soft whir of cooling fans from equipment that should have been dead. In the darkness, he heard his radio crackle to life. "Bridge operator, this is Vernon Kowalski, requesting permission for routine maintenance inspection." The voice was hollow, distorted by static, but unmistakably human. Marcus's blood turned to ice water. According to Rule 5, Vernon Kowalski was dead. According to Rule 1, he shouldn't acknowledge maintenance workers during night hours. But the voice continued patient and professional. "Bridge operator, please respond. This is Vernon Kowalski, employee number 4471, requesting access authorization for scheduled safety inspection." Power returned to the booth as suddenly as it had vanished. All systems resumed normal operation monitors, flickering back to life. Climate control humming back to its steady rhythm. Marcus grabbed the shift protocol manual and flipped frantically through pages until he found Vernon Kowalski's employment record. Employee number 4471, hired March 15th, 2019, night shift bridge operator, status deceased, April 3rd, 2024, cause accidental fall from bridge structure during routine inspection. The radio crackled again. "Bridge operator, I can see you're receiving this transmission. Standard protocol requires acknowledgement within 60 seconds or I'll need to report non-compliance to management." Marcus stared at the radio, his thumb hovering over the response button. Every instinct screamed at him to answer it was a reasonable request from someone who knew proper procedures. But the rules were clear, and Vernon Kowalski was dead. 45 seconds, bridge operator. I'm currently positioned on the south tower and require immediate access to your booth for equipment verification. Marcus looked at camera feed 12. The walking figure was gone. He checked all cameras systematically, every walkway, every access point, every angle of the bridge structure. Empty. 30 seconds. I can see you in there, Marcus. You're in my chair using my equipment. The least you could do is follow basic courtesy protocols. The voice knew his name. How could it know his name? Employee records were confidential, and if Vernon really was dead, 15 seconds. You know, Marcus, the others tried to ignore me too. Rodriguez, Miller, that kid from last summer whose name I never learned. They all thought they could just follow some silly rules and everything would be fine. Others. The rules had mentioned others. How many night shift workers had been through this booth? How many had quit suddenly like Vernon supposedly had? Time's up, Marcus. But don't worry, I understand the confusion. New job, new responsibilities. It takes time to learn how things really work around here. The radio fell silent. Marcus sat in his chair, hands shaking, trying to process what had just happened. According to every rational explanation, he'd just experienced some kind of prank call or radio interference. Dead men didn't request bridge access. But the voice had known his name, known specific details about the bridge, known exactly what to say to sound legitimate. At 2:43 a.m., the emergency communication system crackled with its nightly static. But this time, buried in the white noise, Marcus could hear whispers. Multiple voices overlapping and indistinct, but definitely human. They seemed to be having a conversation, though he couldn't make out individual words. He turned up the volume, gradually straining to understand what the voices were saying. The whispers grew clearer as the static decreased, and Marcus realized with growing horror that they were reading names from a list. Rodriguez Michael. Shift duration 14 months. Miller Patricia. Shift duration 8 months. Davidson James. Shift duration 3 months. Chen Marcus. Current duration 15 days. The whispers stopped. The static faded. Normal radio silence resumed. Marcus opened his laptop and searched for information about previous night shift workers. Employee directories were restricted access, but he found references in old meeting minutes and safety reports. Michael Rodriguez, that was his current supervisor, but according to the documents, Rodriguez had worked night shift for over a year before moving to day supervision. Patricia Miller appeared in incident reports from 2 years ago, then disappeared from all records. James Davidson was mentioned in a workers' compensation filing for stress-related illness, filed 18 months ago. A pattern was emerging and it terrified him. Night shift workers didn't quit. They were promoted, transferred, or left for medical reasons after increasingly short periods of time. The Whispers had called it shift duration, as if each worker had a predetermined expiration date. Marcus was researching Davidson's compensation claim when the bridge lift mechanism activated without warning. The massive counterweights began their slow descent, and the center span started its rise toward the sky. Control panel indicators showed the lift was responding to a scheduled vessel passage, but Marcus's shipping manifest showed no boats expected until morning. According to Rule 4, he should allow the cycle to complete without interference. But every procedure he'd learned demanded that he verify ship traffic before allowing the bridge to open. Unauthorized lifts could endanger vehicle traffic, disrupt shipping schedules, and violate Coast Guard regulations. The lift continued its steady climb. Marcus checked every camera angle of the canal. No ships, no boats, no vessels of any kind approaching the bridge. Yet something had triggered the automated lift sequence, something the sensors recognized as a legitimate ship requiring passage. He reached for the manual override controls, then stopped. The rules were clear. The previous night shift workers who'd ignored the rules had experienced shortened shift durations. Whatever was happening, the bridge was following some protocol that superseded normal operations. The span reached full height and locked in position. Marcus waited, watching empty water where a ship should be passing through. The lift mechanism held its position for the standard 10 minutes required for large vessel passage, then began its descent back to roadway level. As the bridge settled into its normal position with a series of mechanical clanks, Marcus realized something that made his stomach churn. The grinding sound from earlier, the sound he'd assumed was broken machinery, matched the rhythm of the lift mechanism's movement. Someone or something had been practicing. At 3:17 a.m., the screaming started. It erupted from beneath the bridge with such sudden intensity that Marcus jerked backward in his chair, his coffee mug clattering to the floor. This wasn't the mechanical grinding he'd heard earlier, or the whispered voices on the radio. This was raw human terror, echoing up from the dark water of the canal like someone was being tortured in the depths below. Marcus pressed his face against the booth window, peering down into the blackness. The bridge's underside was illuminated by safety lights, casting stark shadows across the massive steel support structure. He could see the concrete piers disappearing into the water, the complex network of cables and girders, but nothing that could explain the source of the screaming. The sound continued for 37 seconds, then cut off abruptly, leaving only the gentle lapping of water against the bridge supports and the distant rumble of traffic on the highway above. Rule 2 was explicit. If you hear voices calling from beneath the bridge, do not investigate, do not respond, do not look directly down into the canal. But Marcus was already looking down, and what he saw made his rational mind fracture. A figure was standing on the water. Not on a boat, not on some floating platform, standing directly on the surface of the canal as if it were solid ground. The figure wore the same coveralls Marcus had seen on the security cameras, and even from his elevated position he could make out the reflective safety vest, the tool belt, the unnaturally pale skin. Vernon Kowalski looked up at the operator booth and waved. "Hello, Marcus," came the voice over his radio. "Sorry about the screaming. Sometimes the others get impatient, but I told them you're still learning the rules." Marcus couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what he was seeing. Dead men didn't stand on water. Dead men didn't speak through radio systems. Everything he'd believed about reality was crumbling around him like rotten wood. "I know this is confusing." Vernon continued, his voice eerily calm through the static. "I felt the same way during my first few weeks. The rules seem arbitrary until you understand what they're really protecting you from. Or rather, what they're protecting you from becoming." On the water below, Vernon began walking toward the north pier. His feet didn't splash or sink, they simply moved across the surface as if it were pavement. Other figures emerged from beneath the bridge structure. People in various uniforms and clothing, all walking on water, all converging on the base of the North Tower. "You see, Marcus, the Duluth Lift Bridge has been killing people for over a century." "Oh, not intentionally, it's just the nature of the structure. All that steel, all those moving parts, all that electromagnetic energy concentrated in one place above moving water. It creates Let's call them disturbances in the normal flow of things. Marcus watched in growing horror as the figures below began climbing the tower structure. They moved with unnatural agility, scaling the steel framework like spiders, their movements too quick and too fluid to be human. Most people who die here move on eventually, Vernon explained. But night shift workers, we're different. We spend so much time alone with the bridge, so many hours listening to its rhythms that we become attached. When we die, we don't leave. We become part of the bridge's security system. The climbers had reached the midpoint of the tower. Marcus could see their faces now in the glow of the safety lights, pale, hollow-eyed, but undeniably aware. They were looking at him through the booth windows with expressions of patient hunger. The rules aren't to protect you from us, Marcus. They're to protect you from joining us. Every night shift worker who breaks the rules gets pulled deeper into the bridge's influence. Eventually, they have an accident. A fall, a mechanical failure, an unfortunate encounter with moving parts. Vernon was directly below the booth, now standing impossibly on empty air. His dead eyes met Marcus's through the glass, and his smile was full of false sympathy. But here's the thing, I've been watching you and you're different. You're strong enough to handle the truth. Strong enough to help us with our real job. What job? Marcus whispered, the words escaping before he could stop them. Protecting the bridge, of course. There are things in Lake Superior that are far worse than us, Marcus. Things that have been sleeping in the deep water for longer than humans have existed. The electromagnetic disturbances from the bridge keep them dormant, but only if the bridge is properly maintained. Only if someone is always watching. The climbers had reached the level of his booth. They pressed against the windows like children looking into a candy store, their pale hands leaving smudges on the glass. But they didn't try to break in. They waited. The choice is yours, Marcus. You can follow the rules, finish your shift, and request a transfer in the morning. Walk away from this place and never look back. Or you can help us protect something much more important than shipping schedules. Vernon gestured toward the dark water of Lake Superior, and for just a moment, Marcus thought he saw something vast moving beneath the surface, something that made the water itself seem to writhe and pulse. What do you say, Marcus, ready to learn what this job really involves? Marcus stared at Vernon's expectant face for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. The figures pressed against his booth windows remained motionless, waiting for his decision. The bridge hummed around him with its familiar electrical vibration, but now that sound carried a different meaning, not the comfort of reliable machinery, but the pulse of something alive and watchful. I need time to think, Marcus said, finally, his voice barely audible through the radio. Vernon nodded as if he'd expected this response. Of course you do. It's a big decision. But Marcus, you should know that time isn't unlimited. The bridge has already started changing you. Haven't you noticed how much easier it's become to accept impossible things? How quickly you adapted to following rules that make no rational sense? Marcus realized with cold clarity that Vernon was right. 3 weeks ago, he would have called security, demanded explanations, refused to work in a place where dead men gave instructions over the radio. Tonight, he was having a conversation with a ghost about protecting humanity from lake monsters, and it felt almost reasonable. The change happens gradually. Vernon continued. First, you follow the rules out of fear. Then you follow them out of habit. Eventually, you follow them because you understand they're necessary. Once you reach that point, you're ready to join us. The figures at the windows began to retreat, moving away from the booth with the same supernatural agility they'd used to climb the tower. Vernon walked backward across the water, his form becoming less distinct as he moved toward the center of the canal. Finish your shift, Marcus. Think about what you've learned. But remember, the bridge remembers everything. Every choice you make here becomes part of your permanent record. The radio fell silent. The figures disappeared beneath the water's surface without a splash. The bridge settled into its normal nighttime rhythm, as if the past hour had been nothing more than Marcus's imagination working overtime. Marcus sat in his chair until sunrise, staring at the canal and trying to convince himself that stress and isolation had caused him to hallucinate the entire encounter. But deep down, he knew better. The bridge had shown him its true nature, and now he had to decide what to do with that knowledge. When Rodriguez arrived for the day shift, Marcus handed over the keys without making eye contact. Quiet night, Rodriguez asked. Yeah, Marcus replied. Real quiet. Marcus called in sick the next night, then the night after that. He spent his time researching the bridge's history, diving deep into newspaper archives and accident reports spanning over a century. What he found made his blood run cold. The Duluth Lift Bridge had an unusually high fatality rate for a structure of its type. Workers had died during construction, during maintenance, during routine operations. But more disturbing was the pattern of disappearances, people who had simply vanished near the bridge without explanation. The most recent cluster dated back 6 months, around the time Vernon Kowalski had allegedly died. On his 4th night away from work, Marcus received a phone call from Rodriguez. Chen, what's going on? You can't just disappear without explanation. We need you back on shift tomorrow night, or we'll have to start disciplinary procedures. I'm not coming back, Marcus said. Find someone else for the night shift. There was a long pause. Marcus, I think we need to talk. Meet me at the bridge office tomorrow morning. There are things about this job you don't understand. The next morning, Marcus sat across from Rodriguez in a cramped office that smelled of coffee and industrial cleaning fluid. Rodriguez looked tired, older than Marcus remembered, with stress lines around his eyes that seemed to have deepened overnight. You met them, didn't you? Rodriguez said without preamble. Marcus nodded. There was no point in pretending otherwise. I was night shift for 14 months before they offered me the day position. Longest anyone's lasted in 20 years. You made it 15 days, which is actually pretty good for someone who didn't know what they were getting into. You knew what would happen to me. Rodriguez leaned back in his chair, his expression a mixture of guilt and resignation. Every night shift worker goes through this, Marcus. It's part of the screening process. The bridge chooses who it wants. Most people break within a few days and transfer out. They forget most of what they experienced, write it off as stress or imagination. And the others, the ones who adapt too well, who start following the rules without question. Rodriguez opened a file cabinet and pulled out a thick folder. They eventually have accidents, falls, equipment failures, incidents that look perfectly normal on paper. Marcus opened the folder and found himself staring at his own employment application marked with handwritten notes he didn't recognize. Psychological profile suggests strong, rational orientation, but with adaptive capacity under stress. One note read, likely candidate for extended observation period. Extended observation period. Rodriguez stood and walked to the window overlooking the canal. The night shift isn't really about operating the bridge, Marcus. It's about identifying people who can handle the truth about this place. People who might be useful for other purposes. What kind of purposes? The kind that keep Lake Superior from waking up. Marcus felt the room spin around him. You're working with them, with Vernon and the others. I'm working for them. There's a difference. Rodriguez turned back to face him, and Marcus saw something in the man's eyes that looked like relief mixed with terror. They don't give you a choice, Marcus. Once you know too much, you either help them or you join them. Those are the only options. And if I refuse, Rodriguez pointed to a newspaper clipping pinned to his bulletin board. The headline read, "Local man dies in tragic bridge accident." Below it was a photo of Marcus's face with a publication date of tomorrow. The bridge remembers everything, Marcus, including the future. Outside the window, the Duluth Lift Bridge stood silhouetted against the gray morning sky, its massive span reaching across the dark water like a steel gateway between worlds. And somewhere beneath its shadow, Vernon Kowalski was waiting for Marcus to make his choice. The only choice he'd ever really had.